and she's only 29 years old. Would you please welcome Tiahni Adamson.
Kapalkuth, good afternoon everybody. So nice to see you all in this beautiful room. Kapalkuth is good afternoon in my language. I'm a Karareg woman, so our family is descended from Torres Strait Islands, or Zendef Kez is the proper name for it. Our island is Waben, but you might know it as Thursday Island, which is the colonial name or the English name for it, not the proper name. It's really important in these conversations that we utilise language. And thank you, Auntie, for your beautiful welcome to us here today. So in the space of talking about International Women's Day, we know that equality and equity is at the forefront of what we need to focus on, to have women at the front, having their voices and their stories heard. As a First Nations person, I am in another minority group in that area, and I really want to share the light with you about how important it is to have equity, not just for women, but for our mob as well, to have our voices heard. So I've got some slides up here, and I'd like to put a discretion up that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people need to be advised that the presentation may contain images of people who have passed away. All of the pictures that are coming up, bar one, are pictures that I've taken across beautiful Australia, and I'm really grateful to be able to share them with you. So you might see some familiar faces from South Australia and all over. As always, I'd like to acknowledge that we're here on beautiful Kaurna Yata and pay my respects to Kaurna people, their elders, past, present and emerging. Acknowledging country is a very, very, very old practice. In fact, one of the oldest cultural practices that we have. And it's important that we continue to maintain this cultural practice now and into the future. So this was a yarning circle at Wiltshire, which is one of the boarding schools that is in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, where students from APY, so Anangu, Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara communities would come down and board to be able to continue their education in Adelaide so that they have better access and opportunities to education down here. So this is a little map, which I always get quite excited to show. This is the real map of Australia, bar the pictures that I've put over the top of it. And it's an important one to get really familiar with. So we know that we're down here on Kaurna country. You can see a really round, fat, small baby head. That's me, not too long ago. So I was born here in Adelaide and born here with my mum, who was a single mum. So it was just me and my mum cruising around. And we then moved up to Palm Island, which is right at the top of Queensland, off the coast of Townsville. We spent a few years living there. My mum works in health, she's a paramedic. And so we had a really amazing experience living on the island. We lived in Palm Island in the early 2000s, where there was a lot of police brutality. The Australian government took a variety of different Aboriginal people who'd committed small crimes, which I'm going to put the word out there, would be for bullshit things that weren't reasons to remove people from their homes, put them on this island with all these different language, law and culture, and expected the island to function effectively, and then added Australian police to try and govern them. So it was a really silly way to try and manage people and culture, and it created a lot of issues and a lot of police brutality that's really sad. So you would have heard about Palm Island back in the early 2000s when we lived there. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world and one of the highest populations of First Nations people in our whole country. Coming back down around Nukunu, Nao, Bungala country, that's where I spent the other parts of my growing up in beautiful South Australia. So my lived experience is mainly through regional and rural SA, and this map is really important to me because it shows that our lived experience comes from a variety of different areas. And I put this up to remind people that I don't represent Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people as one person. Our nations are super varied. Our education and ways of knowing, being and doing is very, very diverse. And when we do things like consultation and try and bring voices to the table, we need to celebrate that diversity and have multiple First Nations people, multiple nations represented, because we all have different lived experiences coming from different areas. So this is paying homage to some of the families and elders that have influenced who I am and where I grow up. The Torres Strait Islander flag right at the top, that's where my ancestral country on my father's side is from. There's an Aboriginal flag over Larrakia country or Darwin, that's where my family live now. We're married in with the Lufats and Larrakia mob. And then on the right there is me with my Yapa or Yolngu adopted sister in Arnhem Land. I spent a few years working between here and Yidawee and Nhulunbuy at Gama, which was really, really fun. Working in the education system to bridge the gap in equity that we have there. Right down the middle is my beautiful Auntie Tiahni Adamson, who we've been in contact with in Armada or APY. And then we come back down to Naarm or Melbourne. There's a little picture of me doing surgery on an alpaca. I'm a failed dropout vet student. That was my original career pathway. I wanted to be a vet. A couple of things that I don't like is blood, euthanasia. I mean, it's important, but I'm not very good at it. I'm super emotional and I get icked out about body fluids. So I had a really good career change. And now, you wouldn't believe it, when I talk to people on stage, I never see any of those things. So I did a good thing changing what I was up to. I think the vet story is important for me to explain because the reason that I went into that place is because I love science, I love looking after the health of animals and the environment, and I found that when I was studying to be a vet, that we were dealing with animals one at a time. And the way that I look at the world is as a very holistic, ingrained ecosystem. Everything relates to one another. The health of people is directly correlated with the health of country. Country's sick, so people will be sick. If the water's sick, animals and plants will be sick. So I studied a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Conservation Biology and graduated after 7 years being in an undergrad degree. Go me. Oh, that's very loud, sorry about that. So today is International Women's Day and we're here to uplift the voices of women and girls in our lives and celebrate the stories and unique narratives that we have. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Count Her In, invest in women, accelerate progress. When women are given equal opportunities to earn, learn and lead, our entire community thrives and our whole societies flourish. Based on this priority theme, the United Nations hopes to establish pathways to have greater economic inclusion for women and girls everywhere, and we've had great examples of the gaps that we currently have. Without equal access to education, employment pathways and financial and family services, as well as integral skills like literacy, how will we ever reach gender equality? So I thought I'd take this opportunity today. When you get given the opportunity to give a keynote, you can go from so many different areas. And there's the side that I could go through about my personal story and who I am and what I've been through, although I don't think it's that important in comparison to the messages that I want to get across to you today. So what I wanted to do is take the opportunities to explain about our communities that are on the front line of climate change, with climate change being the biggest current threat that we have facing humanity and the existence of our planet and all things that live here. We know that climate change is driven anthropogenically, so we caused it as human beings, and we know that we're seeing massive ecological and environmental changes as we speak, coming into a huge heat wave this weekend, and we've got Womadelaide, one of my favourite festivals actually, with toxic waste bins waiting for the fruit bats to potentially die from the heat wave and pick them up and put them in these toxic bins so that we don't get sick. The environment's changing really rapidly and it's scary. And even if we stop every bad detrimental thing that we do in our environment, we're still going to see increased warming, increased disease, increased pandemics like COVID, more polluted waters, and increased sea level rise. Our air is becoming more toxic and it's a really wild time to be alive. But we have incredible solutions in both adaptation and mitigation to be able to do that, and I work for a really fabulous company that is trying to mitigate methane at scale. So this is the only photo that's not mine, but this is of some family back in Zembeth or the Torres Strait, and they're saying our oceans are rising and so are we. I'm not sure if anyone knows how far the Torres Strait is above sea level. Does anyone know? 1 metre. 1 metre above sea level is where our island nations at the top of Australia are. And we've seen sea levels rise by 0.4 of a metre in the last 20 years up there already. So our ancestral remains have been washed away, and that has massively severe cultural implications to the health and mental health and well-being of our communities and families. It's really sad. So enter a bit more positivity. I know that when we talk about the environment that it can get a bit bunged down. I love David Attenborough, he's my second boyfriend. He doesn't know that, but that's okay. I know he's a little bit old for me, but that's all right, I don't mind. I actually don't. I think he's great. But we know that when we talk about the environment, that it can be something that makes us either want to drink a whole bottle of wine or sit down and think about something else. So it's really important that when we talk about these really big, serious issues that we're facing and coming across, that we look at the ways that we can adapt and mitigate. So methane is a massive problem. We have greenhouse gases. Everyone's heard of CO2 and fossil fuels and transport. Methane is the other major greenhouse gas that we have that massively affects our environment. Methane is also 88 times more potent in the atmosphere than CO2, but it's a shorter lived greenhouse gas, so it stays in the atmosphere for about 25 years, which is great because if we mitigate methane and focus really hard on reducing our methane emissions globally, we have a really strong lever to affect climate change positively. So that's the exciting news. And I work for a company that utilises technologies to be able to do that. Does anyone know what this is?
Seaweed.
Seaweed, cool. When I talk to kids, they always tell me blood, and I'm like, I told you I'd tried to get out of the blood thing, that's why I'm here. This is seaweed. This is an amazing seaweed called Asparagopsis. There's two species that are native to Australia and Aotearoa or New Zealand, Asparagopsis armata and Asparagopsis taxiformis. This is the third love of my life, after my real partner, David Attenborough, and then the seaweed. This seaweed has the potential, when grown and processed, to reduce basically cow burps and farts. We're going to talk about burps, and I know they're eating, and I'm really sorry, but I'm here, so we're talking about burps today. Each cow burps about 100 to 120 kilograms of methane per year. And there's 1.8 billion cattle in the world. All the people doing maths in their head being like, wow, that's heaps of methane. It's actually more than all of the emissions of China and the US put together. It's crazy, it's a crazy amount. It's the third largest contributor to methane just from cow burps. Wild stuff. And we've done it. We've grown them and we've put them in feedlots and we've caused this problem. So basically what we do is we commercialise this product into a natural feed supplement that reduces the methane that cows burp and fart. Very cool. I think it's very cool. Less burps, very good. Before we ask, no, you can't give it to your husband. It only works in things that have 4 stomachs. Humans have 1, so I'm really sorry. I do get asked that all the time. We'll work on it. We'll see if we can find anything for, and women as well, you know, if that's your thing. I was just trying to call out men for a bit. I know that we're not supposed to be scratching out men's eyes, but that was my only opportunity. So this is an overcomplicated diagram to show you, but basically what this shows is that for those of you who love science, like me, nerding out up the front here, cows have 4 different stomachs, and basically what these stomachs do is digest food in different ways to be able to process it. Cows eat material that's really hard to break down. That's why we don't eat grass, it's too hard. If you eat corn, you might see it the next day. That's because it's really hard to break down. So you've got an omasum, abomasum, reticulum, and a rumen that's all working in different ways to break food down. It might be mechanically, or it might be adding different chemicals to help that happen. When the microbes in the gut are breaking down the food, they're emitting methane as a waste product. About 10 to 12% of what the cow is eating is coming out as methane gas. So not only when we feed this seaweed to them are they not emitting this gas, they're also able to grow this energy into more fat and protein. So if you're a farmer that doesn't care about climate change, you might be impressed with the fact that you'll be able to grow your cows faster with less resources. Very cool stuff. So coming back into this conversation about equity, I thought it was really a really great opportunity to share with you the work that we do at CH4 Global to be able to mitigate methane at scale, but something that's at the forefront of what we need to do in the climate conversation. Like I said, our communities are on the front line of climate change, our First Nations communities. And our First Nations communities are often the ones who contribute the least to these massive problems and always get affected the most. It's a system that's absolutely not fair and not just. So the focus that I have in other parts of my work and other things that I do outside of work is about having regenerative approaches over sustainability. So ways that we can nurture and look after country to regenerate and be healthier and better time after time after time, which is actually how our communities have managed country and sea since time immemorial, with regenerative approaches. This is a beautiful photo on Nukunu country of a cool burn that we were doing. Cool burns are actually very cool, fourth love of my life, cool burns. They run at a really low heat that is cool enough for animals to be able to run over to escape without getting damaged. It's 65,000-year-old knowledge, or was it 2,600 generations might be down this way, of knowledge that's been passed down to nurture and look after country. I work with a lot of young people when they have this existential crisis about what their purpose in life is, and I'm like, you're here to look after country, that's what we were here for. We're here to help country regenerate and keep it healthy. Simple as that. So if you've been wondering the same thing, all good, you're here to look after country. I've solved your existential crisis. In these conversations of equity and putting women at the front line, to be able to have their voices heard, to be able to have First Nations people being represented at the table, we need to understand the importance of decolonising our current ways of thinking. We have generated all of these thought processes and all of these opinions and biases about the world depending on how we've grown up, how we've lived and what our education was. It's really important to be able to think about equity in a way that gets rid of the biases that we already have, to have an open mind and to really listen to the people that you're asking to come forward and share their knowledge with you. Listening and being informed by custodians. We're getting slightly more opportunities to have seats at the table at the moment, and it's great to see that people want mob in the room to share their knowledge, but it's really important to think about what cultural intellectual property means in this conversation. These knowledges aren't yours or yours to keep or share. There are First Nations knowledges and wisdoms, and they're owned by us and they stay with us. When you're asking for knowledge, it's important to really listen. The big word that we have is Dadiri, which is about deep listening. In my work, I do a lot of uplifting of traditional wisdom and maintaining correct ownership of knowledge, which is when I was talking about cultural intellectual property before. We talk a lot about IP and non-disclosure agreements and things like that in business. There is a whole system being formed by traditional owners about cultural IP as well. I said that our purpose here is to look after and nurture country. There are so many different ways you can do that in your life. We have a huge plethora of experts in this room, and I feel really, really grateful to be standing here talking to you today. There are lots of different ways that you can look at your business and the work that you do to inspire future planning for country that nurtures people, that nurtures equity, and that nurtures the land and water. And if you're not sure how to do it, give me a call and we'll have a yarn. Hopefully you can see this text, but this is one that I wanted to put on. This is some information, speaking to over 200 different mob about how to do meaningful First Nations engagement to inform decision making. I always get asked how you can start about consultation. This is a really basic resource about things that you can look into and ask people about to question yourself. There are heaps and heaps of resources out there to be able to work better with First Nations communities, and it's your role to step up and to bridge the gap in equity. Our people are incredibly overexerted, doing heaps of work to try and make country and their futures better. So please educate yourselves and have a look at some of these keywords to be able to make bridge the gap in equity and make more equal futures for all. The only way forward is in unity for future-focused solutions that bring us all together. So while we're here having the conversation about lifting up and empowering women, please make sure that you're designing for the edges of all minority groups, for First Nations communities, for people of colour, for people with different access requirements, disabilities and abilities, for neurodivergence, for sexual identity, for everything that exists on the edges. We need to make sure that when we're planning for anything and doing our business, that we're including and bringing everybody on the journey with us. We can't solve the climate or solve anything without bringing everyone on board, and social justice and climate justice are incredibly entwined. A last little quote, which is one of my favourites, really important. I said to a friend today that today, as International Women's Day, is not about being the palatable woman. It's not about sitting and looking nice and taking muffins and saying thank you. It's about utilising this opportunity to have your voice heard and your message shared. We're all doing really incredible work and working our asses off to make a difference and make a positive future. Today is not the day to be a palatable woman. Use your mic, network with people that will benefit what you're doing, and make a positive difference, because all your sisters are standing beside you, and lots of men too, to uplift what you're doing and encouraging and egging you on. So this last quote is, I raise up my voice not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. And a last little bit is my LinkedIn, lame, sorry, but if you want to reach out to me, you can scan this QR code here, and maybe you could become the fifth love of my life alongside David, seaweed. I've forgotten what the fourth one is, Cool Burns. Very good. Thank you so much. Well done for the great work that you're doing in business, and please utilise this opportunity to lift up other voices.